here in New Providence. And I hope that we're all, taking the time to just be calm, rest ourselves. We can't control what we can't control, and trust the process. Trust that we are capable, that we are able, we're more than able to deal with the challenges of the day and of the month, of the week, of the year, all of that good stuff, right? So we have a lot to discuss today. I'm excited about my guest that'll be joining me at 5 o'clock, Dr. Madihah Hepburn. And Dr. Hepburn is a Bahamian. She is at the Cleveland Clinic. She is the chief neurological fellow, right? Neurological fellow at the Cleveland Clinic. And we're talking about the neurological impacts or effects of COVID-19. And what are we learning about COVID-19? More information is important for those who've gone through it, for those who are definitely needing to know how to behave or what to do so that they don't, taking seriously the protocols, taking seriously the advisories, the notices, wash your hands, socially distance, wear your mask, taking those things seriously and not believing that this is a hoax or that you are impervious to getting sick. Listen, it is affecting people who have comorbidities. We have a lot of men who have diabetes, heart conditions that they don't know about because they won't go and get tested. A lot of men who are just have poor health and are obese, and they don't believe because they're man that they won't get sick. And then all of us seem to find a false sense of security. So COVID fatigue has actually made us less fearful of the disease and more fearful of the financial crisis. However, if you get sick, that makes it more, that increases or exacerbates, that's the word, your financial crisis. If you are the breadwinner and you get COVID-19, the situation goes downhill from there. And then we would pray that you are not a selfish individual who gets sick, doesn't have any issues, and then decides to go and give it to someone else because you got to eat. Look, we have to be a people, you and I have to be responsible for ourselves and our family. We have to be responsible. COVID-19 is not a hoax. People are dying from it. And we now know people are dying because this is the news every day. Someone's dying, the numbers are up. People are positive. What is the effect if you survive, which most of us will, thank God. But what are the effects, the long-term effects? These are things that science has to learn because it is a novel coronavirus. It is new. The story hasn't been told, right? We don't know about this vaccine, how good it will be, how helpful it will be, and the effects of this vaccine if you take it. So you can't go around trying to believing that you are somehow immune, impervious to sickness, that, Jesus, took care of it all, whatever the storyline is. If you're being irresponsible, if you're not being careful, you are a part of the problem and not the solution. We need the solutions, right? We need to be COVID-free. We need to be healthy so that the rest of the world can say this is a safe space. It doesn't matter how much the government tries to open up the economy. If the businesses that benefit from us being open don't feel safe, they're not coming. And ask the hotels who, after hearing the Minister of Tourism talk about an opening, still has determined that they're not coming when we say that they should come. On top of that, they have a business model. They know their numbers, the math of it. We are looking at the math of it and are desperately wanting income. But then we're being told that everything's okay. We're strong. If we're so strong, we're opening without any true, true strategy or plan. You're just hopeful, eh? I like the administration seems to be very hopeful. It's a lot of things where you're not in control, right? We need to make sure, but we're hopeful that Bahamians will behave so that we stay COVID, we can get these numbers down. We're hopeful that, that tourism will come back if we open the borders. If you build it, they will come. We're hopeful. And look, hope is wonderful. I believe in hope. I love it. I love hope. Hope is a powerful thing. Hope will get you through the dark days. And it's not just hope in hope itself, it's hope in something. When your hope is secured or it's stronger, when it grasps onto a memory, a knowledge, understanding. It grasps onto what you know. Hey, listen, I know that X, Y, and Z never lets me down. So I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that if I go missing, X, Y, and Z will call for me, will find out and know. You're hopeful. You're hopeful in certain things. You're not hopeful in nothing. You're hopeful in something. So, there's a song that says, my hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. Isn't that a hymn or something? So Christians have hope in God. All right, hope in, and not just Christians, but all people of religion and faith have hope in God, that when we pray, he listens. Some have multiple gods, so whoever you're praying to at that point, you're hopeful that the way you're living lines up with God, and that if you sow, you will reap, right? That's like a reward process. If I sow good things, I'll reap good things. And I understand that there are bad days, that there will be bad weeks, bad months, bad years. I understand that there can be harvest and then there can be famine. I understand that process, those principles of life. And that gives me hope that the storm won't last, right? Trouble won't last always. This administration is banking on hope. And are they hoping in God? Because they don't seem to have any information that can help us hope in them, right? Because listening to the Ministry of Finance today, it's nothing different or new than what the minister shared with us, apart from some new borrowings, which he intimated last week, that we would perhaps have to be in some new places to borrow. Investments are slow. We are hopeful that things will resume. When probed on unemployment benefits, when probed on, it was interesting when the deputy prime minister was probed on that his response when asked, I think it was Kyle, was it Kyle or Jared Higgs? I can't remember, somebody from Guardian, by the way. Shout out to Guardian 96.9 FM and 96. Shout out to Guardian, the newspaper. Shout out to the NASA Guardian and our news. Shout out to all of us here at Guardian. Anyways, I digress. When probed on if unemployment would continue after September, one of the things that the minister said, or what he did say, in essence, I'm paraphrasing here, is, listen, to say that there will be no more funding for it is incorrect, right? It isn't fair. I think is what he said. It isn't fair to categorize it this way. And so I asked, well, what else would you categorize it? Well, he said, well, I asked that in my mind. But what he says, the DPM said, was that, listen, we know that in X, Y, and Z time that NIB had sufficient monies for this, and we gave an additional millions for this to help with that. So we made it 26 weeks worth of unemployment. When we get there, we will have a meeting to see what we have, and then I guess what they can do. So to answer the question, is there any monies that is allocated for after September? The hard and fast is no. The hard and fast is there is no money allocated for after September. Now, what can happen, and probably what will happen, and we will have to ask the question, how is this going to be funded? What will happen is that they will have to go back into the kitty or borrow again, because we have a $1.3 billion, what they were, forecasting of debt that they would have to have access to and borrowing. 1.3 billion. I think Marlon says that we were 77% of our revenue to this date, and I wish that I was listening better, because I was trying to figure out, is revenue lost or revenue that you were thinking you would have, and so really it's not 77%, maybe 27% of revenue. I couldn't gather, so I won't even elaborate. If somebody can tell me exactly what Marlon Johnson was saying at that point, that would be great. But the reason why there's so many questions of what are we going to do? Are we okay? Is not because what I would hope, it's not because folks are nitpicking. You look at your household income, if no more income was coming, there's no cash flow. Like those movies with the apocalypse, right? So you're now looking at all of what you have, the inventory of what you have. You go in the cupboard, you count all of the canned foods, you then assess how many people have to eat. How long can we live this way before we have to go outside with the zombies? all right? And if we have to go outside with the zombies, who has to go? Who will go outside with the zombies? Where are we going? And what is the goal, right? So we got to go outside to get food. How much food can we collect? Where can we go? How can we mitigate the risk? And, figure out when we come back, once we figured out the food thing and we're able to sit and live for longer than a day, and this is not panicking now, we're not going to die in the interim, we're not going to die in the short term. What is the strategy to live? Because we don't know when the zombie's going to die out. And last time I checked, zombies are already dead. So how are you going to live and survive? You're just going to sit there, and every time you get hungry in the house, you run outside, risk dying, because folks die on these zombie runs. And so are you going to continue risk dying to get food? Because the places you went for food, they're going to run out of food. Somebody else is going to go there for food because everybody's in the same position. How are you going to survive the zombie apocalypse? This, ladies and gentlemen, is our version of an apocalypse. It's not a zombie one, but are we going to stay in the house? Because the zombie apocalypse, I would think, right? It would probably happen like a pandemic. It would start somewhere, and the news would come, and it would be on like a faint, like 1 or 2 stories. Breaking news in downtown Tokyo, right? Man just spontaneously chomps out the neck of a walking lady. Officials had to shoot him, and all was well. Lady was taken to the hospital. Maybe about a few hours later, incident at the hospital, breaking news. Security guards attacked. 1 nurse is found dead. Then, you're not getting all the news yet. Somewhere along the line, though, it's going to be this whole war Z or whatever. And all of a sudden, Tokyo is done, right? You started hearing all kinds of things. It's coming. Who all was flying? Oh my God, if everybody's on the plane. Where did they go? They landed in New York. New York it's going to end up like that. At some point, the Bahamas has to be watching from afar, saying, hold on, hold on, hold on. Damn zombies ain't coming here. What we doing? We got a 3-month window. Everybody lock it down. Everybody lock it down. This is why you got to do stuff like food security, because the zombie apocalypse might come. This is the reason why you have to do animal husbandry, agriculture, fishing. You've got to be able to produce your own things. Because what happens when a pandemic comes? You can't take care of yourself. You're not able to take care of yourself. Why do we need U.S. reserves? Because we import 90% of what we consume. Hello? So here we are. When asked the question of how are we doing? What is the state of the economy? How are we able to sustain this? What happens if the zombies don't die out? If tourism or the hotels choose to stay closed longer than anticipated? When do we run out of food and money to feed ourselves? What are we risking if we go out, right? And what are we risking if we open up the economy for tourists? And what happens if there's another outbreak? Because I think it's inevitable. Are we going to continue blaming Bahamians for being bad stewards of their job? Are we going to now, like tourism is requiring that persons, that staff, get the COVID-19 tests if they want to get back to work? The question is, how often will you have to be tested? Because every time you're involved with a guest. Now, the guests are vacationing in place, by the way, so they're not wearing the mask. They're not socially distancing on the property. They don't have to do it that way. The property will set its guidelines, but it's not that strict. It will be the employees who will have to protect themselves. Obviously, you're not going to see employees wearing full PPE. You're going to see us wearing masks, but not full PPE, right? You're not going to see them with gloves and scrubs. No. So there is risk associated with it. It's risk going back to work. And yet the staff is going to be required to provide their own COVID-19 test result. So the questioning of those in charge, I believe, is not to continue to berate or make them seem incompetent. It is to push competency, I believe. It is to push the questions of not just holding and waiting in place, right? Because you have guests that we want the guests to vacation in place, but we are waiting in place. We are just waiting and hoping, fingers crossed, that this will all blow away and that somehow we will be fine. Everyone will get the vaccine and the vaccine will have no side effects. And by the way, we know that we are a people who were experimented on openly by the British, who had no problem experimenting on us, and we still asking questions. We don't do our own research to see if any of the issues of BRCA gene came from the experimentations of gas dropped from the sky. We haven't done our research to determine if we are, what has happened with the Rubis oil spill and how is that affecting the communities. Hell, we don't even, do what is necessary when you hear sufficient information. PMH needs a formal complaint before we even address it. So anyways, when you look at this entire process, when you look at this process of us, growing and going through, pandemic is a non-lethal zombie apocalypse. And we can't get ourselves in order with staying in, being in place. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is a problem. It is that space that we're in, where we are now looking at, who are we? What's the best way that we can get this done? The best way for us to achieve the success that we want. I listened to the PM and to the DPM, sorry. I listened to the DPM. And I'm curious what your thoughts were. I look for strategies, right? Where is the COVID sniffing dogs, right? They got dogs that sniff out if you're sick and disease. What is our strategy that when folks come into the airport and they have their 5-day COVID test result, right? And they're vacationing in place. How will we ensuring that this thing works? Also, I'm looking forward to the ERC. I really am. I won't lie to you guys. I am looking forward to the ERC's plans, because when you're listening to Marlon Johnson, the acting financial secretary, he seems pretty stoked. I think he seems very excited. And that is always important, that you're very excited, right? So he seems very excited that we will have some information. What I'm looking for, and I think we all should be looking for, is money invested, right? Where your money is, where you put your money, that's your treasure. We need capital investments, and that's not roads. We need return on investment, right? We need stuff that is building intentional change in the country. You're listening to The Hit Back with Nahaja Black. When we come back, we're going to be talking about, there's some things of some concerns, working to get the busing structure and busing system back up and running, right? That's what we wanted. The jitney drivers wanted that to happen. They wanted to get their area back up and running. And guess what, y'all? Guess what? All of that back up and running, and they're not following protocol. There's a lot of things that are not happening on the bus, and bus drivers, y'all ain't gonna cause people to get sick? No, not here. You're listening to The Hit Back with Nahaja Black. When we come back, let's talk a bit about that. And then at 5 o'clock, Dr. Madihah Hepburn, very excited to have her join us on the show. We'll be back after this.
Tired of banks forcing you to use technology to bank the way they want you to? Your convenience is important. So no matter what your banking needs, Commonwealth Bank's friendly staff are always available in branch for that personal one-on-one service. But when you choose technology, our online and mobile banking app offers you state-of-the-art functionality. The choice is yours. Commonwealth Bank. Bank the way you want.
I ain't marched the car. The lady run into me, marched the car.
I hope she had insurance.
If she had insurance, she hop out, pull out her phone, pull up the Royal Star Assurance app, and bang, she was on a video call with a RSA rep, sending pictures of her damage, my damage, filing a claim on the spot.
For real? Our insurance have that kind of app?
You gotta go to RSA for that.
Download the RSA app today or visit rsabahamas.com to submit your claim online. Live chat available weekdays 9 to 5.
It's the beginning of the hurricane season, and Fidelity Bank is giving you one less thing to worry about. We're not able to control a storm or its path, but we can prepare for it as much as possible. With every debt consolidation loan, Fidelity is giving away fully loaded hurricane kits valued at $200 with all the hurricane essentials you'll need to weather the unexpected storms of life. It's that easy. Sign up for a debt consolidation loan, open an ASUS savings or fixed deposit, and walk away with a free hurricane kit. At Fidelity, we're committed to helping you through these difficult times. Fidelity, we're good for you.
Girl, Junior just showed me Bella Boy in his phone.
What you mean? He take picture of that good-for-nothing boy?
Shh, you don't want Bella here. You say that. You know she always say that's my good child.
So what he doing in Junior phone?
Oh, he there because the police looking for him. He on their wanted list.
Wanted persons in your phone now?
Yes, child. And when police want to find anybody quick, after something happen, they can send picture direct to your phone. Go to Google Play or App Store and search for Crack Crime Bahamas, then pick install and we'll go straight to your phone.
There is also a section on missing persons.
Yes, girl. Everybody needs to get this app so police can tell us right away when these people go missing. Just like an alert system.
Yes, it has numbers for Crime Stoppers Bahamas, so you can call and nobody knows it's you. Call directly to Miami and give the information without giving your name or anything about you. I tried the other day, and when I hear Junior and his boys talking about where they hide those guns, I walk quick round the corner and call that number.
Call 328-8477 from Nassau or 242-300-8477 from the Family Islands.
And we're back. You're listening to The Hit Back with Nahaja Black. It's a beautiful day here in the 242. We've got coming up at 5 o'clock, Dr. Madihah Hepburn, our very own Bahamian chief neurological fellow at the Cleveland Clinic. Young lady, we went to Trent University together. So proud of her, man. I love watching our people, us, succeed and do well abroad. I always tell you, it's amazing how we work. You will be surprised, my fellow Bahamians, right? You would be surprised how built we are, how chafed and how fashioned we are to be great somewhere else. I would tell people this country is filled with motivational speakers, and everybody ended up being pastors, right? Like everybody, is pastors, and everybody in, Toastmasters. No, the world is waiting for you, and you're here toting a load for someone else. The world is waiting for you, Bahamians. The world is your oyster. Where we go, we do well where we go. Very intentional with our success. Shout out to Ari Burrows, doing very well where he is. There's a lot of great Bahamians, old and young, who have excelled in the space that they are in. The only issues I have is that my Blackness is affected by economics, right? But it is not limited by it, right? I'm not limited because of my color, but I know that because of decades and hundreds of years, centuries of slavery, that systems were put in place to further colonize. And we are a country that has been colonized, and the system still works to keep us as the working class. And even the leaders who are of the same race find themselves, fashioned by the system that tells them that we have meager resources, that it must go this way. If you want power, you must sell your soul or your people. So we are fashioned that way. However, one of my mentors, when he and his wife and his family moved, which was like 14 years ago, when we went to visit them, one of the things that they said was that, Nahaja, you will never understand how powerful it is to live somewhere where the system actually works for you. And I was like, well, wow, right? Because Bahamians, we work for titles just to get that meager increase, because that's the only stature you really have. The comfortable life, you have to know someone or whatnot. But he was over there with a lower level title, but his quality of life was far superior. Their home was affordable, but years later, now it's a multi-million-dollar home, but they bought it for $300,000. You look at those changes, and they can go walking at 3 in the morning on trails that are lined with nature and fresh air, and we only walk for health reasons, but we don't walk just to say, let me go down there and get a cup of coffee for a nice walk. Quality of life is a serious thing, y'all. And when we look at our life, is everything is labor, everything is work hard, and then work harder. And when you want to break, they call you lazy. When you need time for yourself because mentally you're falling apart, they call you weak. See, many Bahamians, and that's why vacations is such a big thing. And that's how you know that for years, the quality of life has gone down. I mean, it is vastly reduced. That season of abundance, that screw got tightened. I'll tell you now, that screw got tightened. And I blame a lot of that tightening in 1992 from policies under the Hubert Ingram administration. A lot of those policies, a lot of those changes began to bring up the cost of living. So the dream of the home, the lifestyle that you thought you could, it isn't happening. You look at hoteling, and this is not an issue with the hotel system, but the good money that came then with hoteling was just for a season. There was no Atlantis like it, right? I think there was probably one in Africa, maybe Saul Kirshner did one. But the one in the Bahamas was the premier, right? And we've been chasing this model of a one big giant hotel rather than realizing and looking at Grand Bahama and saying, for God's sake, we need to get Bahamians to own. And the hurdles. I mean, look at Toby Smith over at Paradise Island. The brother had a plan, 8 years with Crown Land. The hurdles you have to jump. The hurdles you have to jump and be Bahamian, but Royal Caribbean can roll up in here in the giant ship and tell you that we're still not going to come to your mainland. You're still not good enough for us, Nassau. We're going to go to Paradise Island. But you know what? You can, as the guests walk off the ship, they're going to walk past the straw market and new businesses can be formed. I wonder, I'm looking to see what this administration is going to do. I'm looking, I'm envious to see what they're going to do with that proposal with Royal Caribbean, which I believe is a sure and a done deal. So, I say all of that to say this, going back to the start of this segue, start of this soliloquy. Here it is, all by itself. We are fashioned to be great, and a lot of us are destined to be great elsewhere. We've just never been told to go out into all the world and preach the gospel. We go down the road and everybody fighting to be prophetess. But what if you were just meant to be a motivational speaker, sister? My brother, what are the tools for your greatness? What if you're supposed to be a teacher, but you're so caught up, right? Because you can't make a living. I look at teachers and, my friend is a teacher, doesn't have insurance. He had to give birth on a public ward at PMH. That shocked me, right? Hazard pay for some people in these fields. Really. Whereas the police force continues to get raises and promotions, they're important, but we're not seemingly able to fix crime anyway. So there's a lot of paying, and per square mile, heck, I feel like I'm almost certain we have more police officers in New Providence per square mile than all of New York per square mile. I'll do the math. Because we got a lot of police officers and the majority are stationed there in New Providence, and we're only 21/7. We got more police officers per square mile, I'm almost certain, than New York does, who has far more people. And our crime rate, relatively, ain't that great. So we're fashioned to be great. And I believe that we're fashioned to be great, a lot of us somewhere else. Sometimes, you ever heard there's a story, there's the parable of the fellow pushing the stone, this giant boulder up the mountain, right? Pushing it all the way up the mountain. And, you know, what was told to him, and this is how the story is reminded in my mind, what was told him, is said, listen, your greatness is to the top of the mountain, right? You have to push this up the mountain. And as you push it, you know, you're going to be great. You're going to get to the top. And that's when we begin to see, you know, your greatness to the top of the mountain. So he keeps pushing this boulder every day he's pushing it, it barely moves. Every day he pushes and barely moves. And at some point, and see, this is, I'm not telling you the story as well as it should be told, but at some point he quit, right? And he was like, I can't do this anymore. It makes no sense. This boulder is barely moving. And the person who was dealing with him says, but look at you. Look at your arms. Look at how you started. Look at the muscles in your back. Look at the muscles in your forearms. Look at your calf muscles. Look at your neck and your shoulders. Look at your thighs. You are ripped. You are ready to go. Now you're shaped into the person you need to be. And really, it wasn't that boulder that was in front of you. That was just your training. That's the process. Now walk around to greatness. You've already been chiseled. We've already been chiseled. Many of us have already been fashioned. The process is the fashioning. The Bahamas, oh my God, look, we ain't Haiti, right? And there's a lot of wealthy people in Haiti, so let me not say that, but we ain't country. And there's a lot of poor, there's a lot of, you know, rich, there's a middle class, but we're not like Iran. We're not getting blown up. We're not, that's not us. Luckily for us, we're in a peaceful nation. We have peaceful elections. We get to say what we want to say. I have a job on the radio as a female, and I can speak on politics, political matters, policies, anything, and not then to be no retribution other than from a few crazy cronies, but ain't nobody trying to kill me. Thank God for that. You know, we're in a great country, but it's still tough because our level, we can't compare ourselves to persons who have it worse, other than to say we have it worse. But our existence isn't easy. But I think that's why when you look at us, we have a great opportunity, a fantastic opportunity to be great, a fantastic opportunity abroad to excel. Our children, when they go abroad, majority of them, not everyone, because, you know, everybody, you know, some people, you know, yeah, swear for everybody. But we do some darn good stuff. So I just want to encourage you, don't ever feel limited by your location. Your location is just a location. Don't feel limited by your location. When God is ready to move in you, he will bring people to you. And then when he's ready for you to go somewhere else, he'll call you out of your space. But don't be limited, and don't let fear keep you locked down. False evidence appearing real. Someone reached out to me today, and they created a new book. They have a book, and I'm so proud of her, and then she will be joining me on the show soon. But more Bahamians are becoming authors. So at this point now, you know, as a businessman, I should be looking for Bahamians to you know, as some sort of resource to help Bahamian authors get their books out there and flourish, right? And we should be buying their books so that it improves in Amazon, right? So we support them. How many books have you bought that you haven't read? So buy the book for them from a Bahamian online and watch it grow, watch it get better. And just support each other as we try to be great. And then your daughter might see that author and she may become the New York Times bestseller. She may be a Pulitzer winner, or Mark Twain a winner. And all because she saw mommy or daddy read a Bahamian novel. Or mommy and daddy said, we got to support this writer. Sweetie, you got to read this book. We have to be those people because we're doing it for our children and our children's children, setting up and creating the standard. Why do you relocate? Don't be the Johnsons. Really have a plan. You know what I mean? Have a plan. Don't jump in no sloop. Have a real plan. Now on another note, I got, you know, because there's some folks, I try to be there for folk. I really do. You know, I try to lobby that the Bahamian business person gets their business on the road, that we are successful, because when each one succeeds, we're good. But what's going on with the buses and the jitney drivers? All of this to get y'all back so that people who actually need to drive the jitney, get on a jitney to get to work or to get their NIB or to go to the doctor or to go to the grocery store or to go to all of these places that are important and vital. Yeah. Why y'all ain't got the hand sanitizer people spraying hands? Why you got the bus full? Why the people in your bus ain't forced to wear masks? I tell you now, road traffic police, we got COVID police, we got the police. We need road traffic police to show up and be the po-po for these jitney drivers and have their license revoked, have the bus parked, take the plate and say you can't drive for a solid 6 months because you're stupid, you're selfish, you don't care about the public health issues. Really? Really, bus driver? Where Michael Pintard is for that poem? Where the bus driver poem? I feel like I need to read that. Bus a ride on Bay Street, right? Really? No hands on it. Every bus driver I've ever been on, every bus I've ever been on, the bus driver had a friend. The friend was the change friend. To give him the change, he gonna hold the money friend. The friend, you know, the fella who sit to the door on the little seat behind the, y'all know the friend was sitting right there. So you mean to tell me in the age of COVID-19, you can't get a sanitizing security guard friend? Damn, most of your friends ain't got a job now anyway. Make sure the people wearing a mask, socially distance. 50% is the protocol rule. And I blame all of y'all who catching bus and you see the bus full. I blame you. I blame you. You too. You don't get out of this. Because as soon as you see that bus full, bus a driver, hold on, sir. You crazy. Yeah? But no, y'all won't be sick. No, y'all won't give people COVID. This is ridiculous. What you jumping on a bus for and it full? My mother-in-law had to go to the clinic. She tells me, she hops on the bus. The bus is fine. She notices though as they're driving, the bus driver keeps going, you know, keeps picking up people. The bus starts to get full. She starts to have a little mini panic attack. And thank God her stop was at the clinic. But right then, like 4 or 5 more people hops on the bus and it's obviously now unsafe, but there's no sanitizing of the hands. There's no forcing the mask protocol and people squish up all over each other. Come on now. Come on now. Some of y'all don't deserve to be free. I'm not gonna lie. Some of y'all, when it make it us free, no. Give it us free, no. Y'all can't handle freedom. Talking banana cream and pie. You know, what is that? Anyway, so if you gotta go on the bus, please don't. If you see the bus is full, don't. And I would hope that we have the COVID police, you know, all of the people who are necessary. Someone's hair rowdy about the bus. Yeah, man, these bus drivers gotta stop. And don't go on the bus, please, listen. Don't, if you see the bus is full, for your own safety, don't go on the bus. Just back up. Hold that $1.25 because it's look, $1.25 ain't easy these days. It ain't easy. Hold on, step off the bus and free yourself. Because this is, people are getting really sick and you don't know who has it. Right? I don't know who has it. Some people are very much asymptomatic. They look great. They sound good. Heck, I might have the COVID-19 antibodies in. I don't know. Right? So we have to be, come on now. We got to be mindful of this. So please, bus drivers, ease up. Do your job right. Come on now. Get somebody to spray the hands, okay? Because right now, we in a zombie apocalypse and ain't nothing working. We're in the house hoping that the zombies die out, okay? We're hoping COVID-19 dies. We ain't got no plan to figure out how to build a society. You ever watch that episode? Never mind. going down the rabbit hole. All right, finally, before we bring on our guest, Dr. Madihah Hepburn, who I'm very much looking forward to as we talk about the neurological impact and effects of, and this woman is so smart. I'm so excited to have her on. She has published multiple papers. She is at the Cleveland Clinic and doing great work there. She is a graduate of Trent University, my alma mater, and she continues, of course, with many PhDs, and I have her CV, which I will read to you at length when she comes, well, not at length, but with good changes when she comes on, because it's very important today. Someone says the word. So, you know, I'm excited that she's on, because I think the more we know about this virus, the more that we know how to handle ourselves. Something interesting she wrote in a paper about seizures, in one of her papers about seizures. And I think that I know a story of a gentleman who ended up having a seizure, his wife, one of the first ones, having a seizure in the shower. His wife had called, what's the number, 311 multiple times to keep telling him, well, what he's experiencing is not a COVID-19 experience. It sounds more like a cold or flu. She was very concerned. She continued to call the hotline. And when it was really bad, she put him in his temperature was flaring up. She put him in the shower. And in the shower, he had a seizure, right? In the shower, he has a seizure. And at that point, the hospital 311 says, it still doesn't sound like COVID-19, but bring him in anyway, because of course, now the man is having a seizure. You don't ignore seizures, right? So bring him in anyway. And they did come to find out that it was COVID-19. And that information, right? That information was eye-opening to me, because of course, all right, so you can have seizures with this thing. It's possible, right? Then you hear other stories of COVID-19 affecting your balance, your equilibrium, right? So persons are now feeling more clumsy. What does that mean? Then strokes. Are people getting strokes because of it? Right? I have tons of questions when it comes to this virus. It is very intriguing what this virus is, what it has become, and how it is affecting and impacting our daily lives. Like, no joke. This is a very interesting story. So I'm very happy to have Dr. Hepburn, who will be joining me at 5 o'clock. And one of the things that I love about it, by the way, she's a neurocritical care fellow, at the Cerebral Vascular Center at the Cleveland Clinic. And she has multiple licenses. She has been a neuro resident, distinction in surgery and honors in OBGYN. Brilliant young lady, so I'm looking forward to that. Now, before we get to her, there's a thought that I shared with some friends today. And when the DPM said something, the Deputy Prime Minister said something in his address today. And what he said today in his address was, we have to be a people that live in hope, right? We must live in hope. That's a wonderful statement, a wonderful statement. We have to live in hope. And I think if you get it, you know, living in hope, to live in hope is a powerful position. That you don't live outside of it, you're always in the middle of it. You're always present in hope. And I loved that. I didn't like much about the speech, but I didn't love much about the speech, wasn't encouraged by the speech much, but that was a very encouraging thing. And his delivery wasn't great, but the statement was true. And in this season, living in hope, I believe, is having joy. Happiness and joy may seem to be family. They are family, but they're two different people. They're family, but they're different people. They're not the same person. They're different people. Happiness is circumstantial. You give me a car right now, particularly a Tesla. Holy smoly. It may not last long because nobody could fix it, but I'll take it. And my happiness will be to the roof. I'll talk about this car for months. I might not even really drive it. I might like take it to the store. I'll take a few photos on social media. But at a certain point, that happiness, that honeymoon period will pass, and I'll really like the car. But you know what? If you take the car away, will I be sad? Yes. But will I be done? No. I'll be good. Because you know what I believe? Inside, joy is that one candle in the darkness. Joy is that spring of hope. That's internal. That is not circumstantial. That, you know, everything happens, but I still got joy. I'm still okay. Some people say, well, Naj, I love your spirit. I honestly, y'all need to see me on my down days. But who I am is who I am. Hope is what springs eternal, man. You have to be hopeful. And I said at the beginning of the show, that hope is something that you attach to a thought. Like I believe that if there's a situation that I get into, that I can get out. And I'm not getting out because of my own power. I have hope in God. That's me. I have faith. Faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. That isn't based on if my pastor decides that he wants to have multiple affairs or if my husband decides to leave me. My faith is built on something that is internal, that is personal. You know, Mike Murdoch says, he's an author, and he says, you'll never truly know if you believe in God until the very foundation of your belief is shook. You'll never truly know what you are made of until the very foundation of your being is shook. The thing that you held on to the tightest, that gave you identity. So for some, it's your relationships. For others, it's your job. For a lot of men, when they lose their job or their careers, they go in a spiral. When they lose the ability to provide, they lose their identity. That identity is what gives us this hope that we are capable, we're confident that we can do these things. There's someone who spoke life into you that springs a seed. And if everyone spoke negatively in you, then there are negative seeds. There's very little hope. There's no farm of hope. In this season, if you are not hopeful, begin to plant the hope seeds. Begin to say to yourself, like David spoke to himself, begin to say to yourself, I am confident, I'm capable. I'll get through this. We gonna eat. That something is gonna break. I'll get the job. Believe, 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 believe. That's all some of us have. Don't lose hope. You've got to live in it. But you know how you live in hope? You make sure you plan. You be strategic. You be intentional. Don't just wait for the money to fall by the beach, boo. Them days over. Let's plant some seeds of hope by doing some things that are very much productive and will produce the things that you're looking for. You're listening to The Hit Back with Nahaja Black. Now, Dr. Madihah Hepburn. When we come back, I'm looking forward to this conversation. We'll be back. You're listening to The Hit Back, Guardian 96.9 FM on a beautiful, rainy Wednesday afternoon. We'll be back right after this.
This is Guardian Radio 96.9 FM, Nassau, Bahamas.
Good afternoon, everyone. You're listening to the Guardian News Network. I'm Taylor Ferguson. Here's what's making news. Thank you so much for tuning in. The country's COVID-19 death rate continuing to climb, according to Health Minister Renward Wells. He also revealed in Parliament today Nearly 60% of the country's confirmed COVID-19 cases are still active. As of September 8th, we have 2,657 confirmed cases. The new COVID fatality rate is up from the previously reported 1.58% in late August.
We have lost 63 lives to COVID-19 with a case fatality ratio of 2.4%.
Wells noted the Bahamas has seen a more vicious spread of COVID across nearly every inhabited island in the second wave. With many still unemployed and depending on government assistance, Finance Minister Peter Turnquest asked today whether government would look to extend its unemployment benefits beyond the month of September. NIB Minister Brenzel Roll indicated last month government would be able to provide the assistance up to the end of September. Turnquest could not say definitively whether government will go beyond the end of the month.
At the end of that period, which will end in September, we will make some decisions based upon the resources that are available. So at this point, it's a little early to make that definitive statement. The performance for the next month will determine what is available for us to extend the program, and we will make decisions at that time.
Nearly $150 million has been paid out already in unemployment benefits through a number of programs since the beginning of the pandemic. The figure was released by the Deputy Prime Minister in Parliament on Wednesday. Turnquest said combined, the programs have supported approximately 43,200 people and poured $146.5 million into the domestic economy. That's what's making news. I'm Taylor Ferguson. AP News is coming up next.
Afternoon, and a look at traffic now. Overcast skies and intermittent rain still in the forecast for the remainder of this afternoon. In the streets, you've got key thoroughfares that are active right now. In the city, Wolf Road, busy the entire lane. Traffic is heavier on the eastern end as you get into that Mackey Street intersection and into the Marathon roundabout. Mackey Street itself is displaying that traditional heavy traffic flow. The slowest line is on the northbound lane. Over on Blue Hill Road, still early yet, but the traffic jam has already formed. Standing traffic moves slowly along both south corridors after leaving Robertson Road, moving slowly into the roundabout. And the same thing happening on the two-lane activity on E Street in the corridor between Robinson Road and the roundabout there as well. Of course, traffic is busy on Carmichael Road, also along E Street in the south and Soldier Road as well, but mainly just busy. There are no rail congestions and delays going on as yet. West Bay Street, busy as well. Delays are minimal, though they endured another day of road paving and corridor diversions going on over there. It's still passable with no delays or congestions going on. That's a look at traffic across the island at the moment. This is a service of J.S. Johnson. At J.S. Johnson, if you're looking for a quote online, visit jsjohnson.com direct quote page. Get an online quote for your home, your auto, commercial property, and more. With your Ryan Sky look at traffic, I'm VA Double Ed. Back in an hour with an update.
Coronavirus update. I'm Tim McGuire with an AP News Minute. In a book based on 18 taped interviews with President Trump from last December through July, journalist Bob Woodward writes that Trump seemed to understand the severity of the coronavirus threat, even as he told the nation the virus was no worse than the seasonal flu and insisted the government had it totally under control. Today, Trump said he decided against revealing the threat to not frighten the public.
The last thing we can show is panic or excitement or fear.
Democrat Joe Biden's reaction?
He failed to do his job on purpose. It was a life and death betrayal of the American people.
An international study of a vaccine candidate by AstraZeneca is on hold as the company investigates whether a British volunteer's illness is a side effect or a coincidence. Dr. Francis Collins heads the National Institutes for Health.
When we say we are going to focus first on safety and make no compromises, here is Exhibit A.
I'm Tim McGuire.
Beulah gal, can you believe this? We are now the patrol queens of the neighborhood.
We now large and in charge. So we need to check out what's going on in everybody's yard. What about that gun that we know that Junior and his homeboys just ran out? Can we report that too?
Of course we can.
But we could be in deep trouble if they find out.
We need to report what we see, Beulah. When you call Crime Stoppers, they just answer your call in Miami.
So then we can report everything? Guns, where they hiding the drugs, who shoot who part of which gang, or who disturbing the peace with the loud music and the motorcycles.
Then our neighborhood will be the best in the Bahamas, and everybody gonna want to come live here. And then our house price will go up, gal.
So what we waiting on? What's the number?
If you see something, say something. Let us all pitch in and stop the crime before it's your time. Call 328-8477 from Nassau or 242-300-8477 from the Family Islands. Or text us through the Crack Crime Bahamas app. Stop the crime before it's your time.
Babe, you marched the car?
I ain't marched the car. The lady run into me, marched the car.
I hope she had insurance.
If she had insurance, she hop out, pull out her phone, pull up the Royal Star Assurance app, and bang, she was on a video call with an RSA rep, sending pictures of her damage, my damage, filing a claim on the spot.
For real? Our insurance have that kind of app?
You gotta go to RSA for that.
Download the RSA app today or visit rsabahamas.com to submit your claim online. Live chat available weekdays 9 to 5.
And we're back. You're listening to the Hit Back with Nahaja Black. I'm so excited. Oh, look at us. This is okay, guys. First of all, if you're not following us on YouTube, you're missing it. You get to see in person one of the country's greats. Yeah, you get to see in person one of our shining stars. Look, she's not blushing yet. She's used to this type of intro. But none other than our very own Dr. Madihah Hepburn. Doc, how are you?
Oh, fine, thanks. Thanks for inviting me. It's great to see you after all these years. Way back in undergrad days.
when I just did one thing, you became the superstar. I'm so proud of you, Madihah. I'm so proud of you. You're amazing. So congratulations.
Thank you.
On all that you've done and all that you're doing. And I was reading some of your articles today after you sent me this wonderful CV, by the way. And I think if you have a CV like that, someone should run out and say it, like what you have. So I want to make sure that folks know who we're talking to here. You are presently the Neurocritical Care Fellow, Chief Neurocritical Care Fellow?
Yeah, so I'm actually a board certified neurologist, and then instead of going to work, I decided to go and do more training. And completing my last year at the Cleveland Clinic, and so I'm a neurocritical care fellow. And neurocritical care is kind of a subspecialty of neurology, where you basically deal with neurological emergencies as a specialty.
Oh wow, that's even more amazing. Okay, so then you're all up in people's brain, period.
So I'm actually not. So I'm actually not a neurosurgeon. I'm a neurointensivist essentially. So we basically are the ICU docs that take care of all the brain emergencies. So essentially anyone who has a massive brain surgery, big stroke, lots of seizures, they come into our unit and we take care of them in the ICU.
Oh, okay. See, there you go. I'm learning something new. And I think I'm almost positive that all of my listeners just learned something new there too.
Yeah.
So you went back to school. You said you're not done. You wanted to go neurocritical care. You're now the chief there, the chief neurocritical care fellow. You say, and I see in your CV you have 2020, 2021. Is there like a short term for that, or is it just what you want?
So it's my last year of training. So you basically are you're the chief of the training year, and so I'll be completing next year in 2021.
And what's your next step after that, Doc?
So my next step is actually I took a position as a staff neurointensivist here in Cleveland, in Akron, Ohio, at a hospital. So I'll be moving there next year.
Congratulations, man. I'm so happy for you. And I'm glad that we're doing this because what I didn't tell you, I don't know if I did tell you this, but the reason why, I was so happy that we did this and I reached out was I was talking to my children's pediatrician, right? So when they were finally able to go ahead and get their shots.
Right.
And she mentioned that you were doing a talk with physicians about the neurological impact or effect of COVID-19 on patients, right? So the effect of it. And I must say, I didn't think of that. And so when I didn't think of something, it's a show. To me, it's always information, right? So we got to make it work. So tell me a bit about what you've seen with COVID-19 and that being your expertise, well, your field of expertise now, what you've seen with COVID-19 and its effect on, folks, our brain, our neural system.
Right. Well, first of all, I'd like to say thanks to Dr. Maria Francis because I knew her from when I was in medical school and she reached out to me and said, hey, do you know Nahaja Black? And I said, oh yeah, actually I do. And so she was able to connect us. So that was awesome. So I did a talk early in the year, I think in July, for a continuing medical education talk for the physicians at the Princess Margaret Hospital on the neurological effects of COVID. So we're pretty specialized in that we take care of brain emergencies, but we take care of also patients who have COVID and also have, neurological emergencies. So when the pandemic hit, this was so new that no one really knew anything. It started off with cases of pneumonia in China. And then about April, persons started, there was like this race to publish, because everything was new and different. And we were observing tons of things. So it started off as a respiratory illness, a pneumonia problem. And then we realized in April, one of the first publications was actually still out of China, was a collection of maybe about 200 or so patients where they noticed that those patients who had COVID, nearly a third of them also had severe neurological injury. And that severe neurological injury kind of ran the gamut between things that affected what we call the central nervous system. Those are things like strokes and seizures, also to kind of global brain dysfunction. So we're talking about the term we use called encephalopathy, where basically the weight of the systemic illness on the body was affecting the brain itself and kind of like making the whole brain dysfunctional. So we were seeing these encephalopathic patients who were very, very slow to, very, very almost like comatose essentially, even though we couldn't find anything on the imaging. They just were taking a long time to what we call wake up from a coma. For a variety of reasons. And then, also the, minor things like you probably have already heard of, things like, loss of smell, loss of taste because of the effect of olfactory nerve. So that was kind of like the first kind of collection of cases back in April. And then more and more, things got published and we basically were seeing more and more patients. So in the Cleveland Clinic, we were fortunate that, we have COVID ICUs. But we also, our own neuro unit was, separated out into what we call a COVID ready unit. And we had patients who were coming in with a stroke. And then we realized these patients were not the typical patients who had stroke. You think of a person having stroke, someone who have high blood pressure and diabetes and things like that. But we were noticing younger patients coming in with stroke. And that was also an observation that they saw in New York at the center of the pandemic. So one of the first publications was from Coulumbia University, where they published a series of at least 5 patients who were all under the age of 50, all presenting with major stroke. So, these were kind of the inklings that we were seeing, at the beginning of the pandemic. And now as things are progressing and we're seeing more and more, at the Cleveland Clinic, we're very fortunate that we have a lot of ability to monitor the neurological system. One of the ways we do kind of what we call continuous electroencephalographic monitoring, where we're looking for seizures, but it also looks for essentially kind of like the alertness of a patient, And we're seeing that there's a lot of patients with COVID who are having prolonged recovery neurologically, where they're just basically either delirious or, which basically means they're like hallucinating. They're kind of like talking out of their head, when they're not on the ventilator, to seizures, to strokes. Yeah.
Wow. I have tons of questions. Okay, if you're just tuning in, I have tons of questions. If you're just tuning in, we have Dr. Madihah Hepburn, MD, here with us, talking about her field of expertise in neurocritical care. And we're very excited and honored that she's on the hit back with us via Zoom. You can follow us live on YouTube as well. If you're not listening or you're unable to follow us on the radio, if you're hopped out your car, you can go to the Zoom channel. You can go to the YouTube channel. You can type in Nahaja Black and you will see us live there. All right, Doc. So there's tons of things that you said, and I made mental notes, right? And hopefully my non-COVID affected brain can stay with it, right?
Sure.
You mentioned seizures, and I there was before you came on, I don't know if you heard it, but before you came on, I was talking about one of the first few cases. I remember having one of the patients tell the story of how her husband, at the beginning of this process, maybe our first wave, he wasn't exemplifying the traditional of what we thought was the COVID symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
However, he had a seizure when his temperature was high, and then he had to be rushed in, and then they found out that he had COVID-19.
Sure.
And they tested him she would argue too late because he went in Wednesday, but they didn't test till, Sunday because they still didn't believe that he had COVID. How are the seizures? Are you finding that this type of reaction in the brain, does it have anything to do with any existing comorbidities, or is it something that can just happen?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so, that's actually one of the first papers our group published, I think in April or May, was on basically, a case series of patients with seizures and COVID. And what we're finding were that, one, were that these were patients who did not have any preceding history of epilepsy. These were patients who had never had a seizure in their life. They didn't have any other risk factors, presumably, for seizures. And they basically had severe COVID with some of them had respiratory findings and some of them did not. So that example of, the gentleman who, where the seizure was basically his first, manifestation, and probably some alteration of his consciousness or maybe his sensorium probably preceded it. But there wasn't the typical, cough, cold, fever,
right.
or high, cough, cold, respiratory things that we thought of. And so, the two things that we realized was that, the coronavirus, the SARS-CoV-2 virus has both an indirect and a direct effect on the brain. There's a direct effect. We're getting more and more mounting evidence that there's a direct effect of basically neuroinvasion, that the virus basically affects receptors in the brain tissue and the blood vessels of the brain, and can actually have a direct viral effect, which when it causes this kind of like this storm of inflammation, it basically kind of upregulates lots of what we call hyperactivity in the brain, and then that can lead to seizures. And then the second way around is that, yes, there's an indirect effect in that the brain is affected by your body. So any illness in the body, the brain doesn't like it. Like the brain likes to have normal blood sugar, likes to have a normal temperature, likes to have normal electrolytes. But when you have a COVID infection, it's systemic, so multi-system. So, the blood sugar gets out of order, the temperature's out of order, and the brain doesn't like it. And as a result of that, there's an inflammatory reaction and there's a hyperactivity reaction, and there can be seizures.
This is I'm listening to you and I'm thinking, holy smokes, I think we think of it as something simple. I think a lot of they may say, okay, well, listen, it's just a really bad flu or cold. But what you're saying here, Dr. Hepburn, is that COVID-19 in its aggressive nature, it does things to us that a normal cold or flu wouldn't do. And in particular, the brain is inflamed. That part there, I feel like I need like an iced tea with something in it to make it special. But are we underestimating this? I think Bahamian culture, we are underestimating this, and we think we should drink some Thirst.
Well, I mean, first of all, I'll have to say, I'm not practicing in the Bahamas right now, although I have, a lot of colleagues that I still stay in contact with. So I do get kind of periodic updates of what's been happening. But like I said, I don't have firsthand information because I'm not the person in the Bahamas taking care of patients. But I would say, yeah, there probably was kind of like almost like a downplaying. It says, oh, well, it's just a cold, it's just a this, it's just a that. But when you actually take a step back and look at the coronaviruses, because the coronaviruses are a class of viruses, and this, COVID-19 disease is not the first coronavirus pandemic. There was as far back as 10, 15 years ago in 2003, there was the first SARS pandemic, which was short-lived. It kind of went around the world and stopped. And then a few years later, there was something called MERS, which is Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome, coronavirus. But the information that we got back in 2003 was that the coronaviruses as a class are much different from the influenza virus, which causes the flu. And the coronavirus as a class, they have a kind of and from my aspect, from my specialty in terms of neurology, they have a particular predilection for neuroinvasion, for brain invasion, as a class as a whole. So we already knew, based on animal models and previous autopsy studies of the previous coronavirus pandemics and MERS pandemic, that there was viral, the virus was integrating itself into brain tissue. So, now that we've fast forward to 2020, this virus itself has some inherent neuroinvasive properties. So yeah, there are a lot of things that are happening to your body, to a multi-system, multi-organs that all play a role. And, the thing that's still unknown is what's the long-term effect,
Yeah.
So, you might have had seizures from coronavirus, you might have a stroke from coronavirus, but what about those patients who have kind of like that delirium or coma? What's going to be the long-term cognitive impact? And, honestly, we don't know that, Jen.
Some things that you mentioned there, Dr. Hepburn, that really stood out to me. All right, so you mentioned delirium, right? Mm-hmm. You would consider that, if we were doing scales, that's the minor, right? That would be your lowest scale effect.
So you know what? I don't think I can say it's delirium is worse than is worse than a stroke. I mean, because we have kind of a collection of patients with what we call ICU delirium, so patients that were really sick in an intensive care unit, and they've done, and this is not for coronavirus patients, but this is in general. What we know already about delirium is that patients in an ICU who have delirium, or what we call psychosis related to whatever their acute illness, when they actually do functional brain studies of them, years later, they actually have decrease in brain volume compared to age-matched controls. Really? So yeah, really. So those are just patients with plain old regular infections or whatnot. Yeah. So I mean, delirium sounds like it's not too bad. Your mom or your dad talk a little out of their head.
Yeah.
Get a little psychotic, a little hallucination, but you give them some medication. But really, that type of long-lasting effect, we really don't know what's going to be the effect of it. But of course, if you, things like a stroke, which leaves a physical
Exactly.
deficit, that one is pretty clear that it's going to affect the quality of your life.
You know what? When you said that, it made me wonder when talking about the delirium aspect of it, right? During this time, we just automatically assume that people will be depressed, that people will, have mental breaks, that maybe suicides will spike. But what you're talking about, Doc, just mentioning delirium as a possibility, should we now be saying, okay, well, listen, if there was a suicide that happened in the COVID time, should we test?
Oh, I mean, that's a difficult question. I don't know. There's been so when at the end of the day, any answer I give, I have to root it in the data that I know.
Of course,
the evidence that we know. So there was like a what we call a retrospective, collection, kind of like of symptoms and persons with COVID, and they kind of go through what are your symptoms are going to be. What the symptoms were, and they found that at least 30% of patients treated, and this is one cohort, I think, of a hospital in New York, there were at least 30 to 40% of patients who actually have what we call psychiatric symptoms, neuropsychiatric symptoms related to also being hospitalized with COVID. So that's anxiety, depression, psychosis. Now, a person who has a history of depression and some anxiety, who makes a plan and commits suicide, should you test them for COVID? I don't think probably not.
No,
I would say probably not, but and I would say probably is going to be a pretty small proportion.
Yeah, something else that you mentioned when you talked about inflammation, right? Mm-hmm. Inflammation of the brain. I had another doctor on, Dr. Susan Williams Lockhart, and she talks a lot about, the comorbidities and how, and even with our data here, we found that every hospitalized case had a comorbidity.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, right. So hypertension, diabetes, etc.
Mm-hmm.
If we're talking inflammation of the brain, I'm thinking persons who are diabetic are always inflamed, right? So how serious is this if you were, say, looking at our environment where we are a country filled with comorbidities? The number one would be obesity, right?
Yeah, right.
So what would be your expectation, not your hyper expectation, but based on the research that you've done, and looking at our state, our comorbidity factors, and our behavior, our eating habits, who we are demographically. What would you say, Dr. Hepburn, you would expect in a neurological sense from the patients that you see?
Yeah, so that's a great question, especially since if you look kind of globally, persons who are obese, are having more complications related to COVID. Patients who of course are older. So as you get older, you have what's called kind of like what they call the immune system becomes less active. So it's called immune senescence. And in addition to that, you add on the comorbidities of hypertension and diabetes and things like that, and all these patients are going to be at, of course, higher risk. And the patients that we've seen, so patients who have hypertension, diabetes, they already are at risk of having a stroke or whatnot. I'll just use stroke as an example. And now added to the fact that you add on coronavirus, which does affect the blood vessels and makes them at higher risk of blood clotting. And that blood clot can travel to the brain and cause a stroke, then yeah, we probably are going to see we're already from what I understand, we're already seeing a surge of COVID in the Bahamas, and kind of like the environment is ripe for essentially for it to ignite, essentially, because we have the fuel for that fire, essentially. No pun intended.
No, and I think that's why too we're seeing such a high mortality rate here with it, and which is sad, because I don't think we realize how our eating habits would be affected. This would be so such a big issue in this pandemic, right? Because I mean, Jesus, if you fat, everybody in the church pew fat, it is what it is. You don't even call it fat anymore. We don't call ourselves obese. It's solid. Right.
We've normalized it, essentially.
Yeah, essentially.
And I did my training in the state of Missouri, and the state of Missouri is also kind of like it's in what we call the stroke belt. There's lots of obesity, lots of hypertension. In fact, they call persons who anyone who's overweight, they just call it Missouri medium. I'm serious, and I know, and it's not just the Bahamas. The United States overall as well is overall more obese, compared to other countries.
Yeah.
But I think that is a portion of it. But honestly, if we have to be committed to doing the mechanisms to keep ourselves safe, universal masking, social distancing. All of those things are important in order to get a handle of this and decrease the spread. Here in Ohio, Ohio actually introduced universal masking, I think in June, in late May, early June. I may not be exactly correct on the exact month, but kind of like mid-pandemic, essentially. And now after they introduced universal masking, the cases actually did start to fall. Like they had there was a exponential decline. Yeah.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, more with Dr. Madihah Hepburn, our very own Bahamian born and bred, brilliant Bahamian young woman. I'm happy to say that I know her. We are acquaintances. We'll be friends for sure. No, she's a chief neurocritical fellow. For God's sake, it's over. We will be back after this. Listen, everyone, I hope you're learning. If you have any questions, feel free to text them. And let's see if we can get those questions asked and answered. When we come back, I want to talk more about diving into those other effects, like the strokes. I've heard, Doc, about people becoming more clumsy and not being able to do what they used to do, and that shocked me. So I wanted us to talk about that and see how that comes about, which you guys have found.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, we'll be back right after this. You're listening to the Hit Back with Natasha Black live on Guardian 96.9 FM. We'll be back.
Girl, Junior just showed me Bella Boy in his phone.
What you mean? He take picture of that good for nothing boy?
Shh, you don't want Bella here. You say that. You know she always say that's my good child.
So what he doing in Junior phone?
Oh, he there because the police looking for him. He on their wanted list.
Wanted persons in your phone now?
Yes, child. And when police want to find anybody quick, after something happen, they can send pictures direct to your phone. Go to Google Play or App Store and search for Crack Crime Bahamas, then pick install and it will go straight to your phone.
There is also a section on missing persons?
Yes, girl. Everybody needs to get this app so police can tell us right away when these people go missing. Just like an alert system.
Yes, it has numbers for Crime Stoppers Bahamas, so you can call and nobody knows it's you. Call directly to Miami and give the information without giving your name or anything about you. I tried the other day, and when I hear Junior and his boys talking about where they hide those guns, I walk quick round the corner and call that number.
Call 328-8477 from Nassau or 242-300-8477 from the Family Islands.
Babe, you marched the car?
I ain't marched the car. The lady who run into me marched the car.
I hope she had insurance.
If she had insurance, she hop out, pull out her phone, pull up the Royal Star Assurance app, and bang, she was on a video call with an RSA rep, sending pictures of her damage, my damage, filing a claim on the spot.
For real? Our insurance have that kind of app?
You gotta go to RSA for that.
Download the RSA app today or visit rsabahamas.com to submit your claim online. Live chat available weekdays 9 to 5.
And we're back. You're listening to The Hit Back with Nahaj, your Black Dr. Madihah Hepburn. Very excited to have her here. Chief Neurocritical Care Fellow here at the Cleveland Clinic, and moving to, where are you moving to again, Dr. Hepburn?
I'll be moving to a hospital in Akron, Ohio.
Oh, Akron. Tell LeBron I said, hey, you know, he's not there, but just
he went to LA.
I know. He left y'all right away. Did you burn a jersey?
Actually, the year that I found out I was moving to Cleveland, like 2 weeks later, I found out LeBron was going to LA.
Ah, you poor thing. You didn't even get to see a game. You poor thing.
It's okay. My favorite is Tim Duncan anyway. So.
Oh, Tim Solly retired. Oh my God, you're a Spurs? You're a Spur?
David Robinson all the way.
Yeah, Dave was amazing. Dave was amazing. And then you couldn't go wrong with Tim because, you know, Tim's Caribbean. You can't help it.
Twin Towers. So
yeah. So it wasn't half bad. But no one I know is a Spur fan. Nobody I know.
I've always been a Spurs fan.
Well, listen, at least you get to see all of the bad games in Cleveland, you know, because y'all can't play.
Yeah, the Browns are terrible.
Yeah.
Hopefully
at least it's football.
Hopefully no one from Cleveland is listening in.
They know. All Cleveland fans know the Browns are terrible.
They do know that. But they love them anyway.
You still have the what's the name of your quarterback? I can't remember his name.
Oh, you know, I don't watch American football.
Oh, that's the best part.
I just learned the pro team that's in the town I was living in.
Well, you know, I heard that you know, there was a great joke last night on. Anyways, we're digressing because I was so going to take you into sports talk, but we're digressing. All right. So Dr. Madihah Hepburn here joining us, and we're talking about COVID-19 and in her field, her specialty, of course, neurocritical or neurology, right? And your field of study. And if you want to, you can go and read some of her papers. Let me just list it because it's actually pretty cool. Being able to say, okay, I'm reading papers led by Bahamian, acute symptomatic seizures in critically ill patients with COVID-19. You know what, y'all? Who am I kidding? I'm going to post these on my page because y'all don't remember these titles.
Yeah, they're actually open access. So honestly, if you just type them in, you can read them.
No, they are open access, which I love because I was reading the first one with the acute symptomatic seizures, which, as I told you, that caught my eye because of the story of the gentleman who had a seizure, but they didn't know it was COVID, right? So that definitely, that was jumped out to me. But let's get into it. So something else that is, you know, we talked about, you mentioned strokes, and strokes many people, I think, would not have thought that COVID-19 and strokes would go together. Like we started off our discussion, many believe that it is still respiratory. And I didn't even, until you said something earlier, think about the loss of taste and loss of smell as a neurological issue. I didn't think of that. So that you said that there was one of those indicators that this is affecting the brain.
Yeah, so that's actually one of the early signs that people started thinking about and started realizing that, hey, there was a neurological connection, because so yeah, we it's a respiratory virus, so you get it by coughing, sneezing, and that type of contact with your respiratory, your nasal passages, things like that. But if you think about it, what supplies your sense of smell and taste? It's a nerve called the olfactory nerve, which is basically in direct connection with your nasal passages. And where does the olfactory nerve go? It goes directly into the underneath essentially in the frontal lobe, essentially. So what we realized was that there was basically what we call direct extension. So basically from the nasal passages through the olfactory nerve, and then once it got into the olfactory nerve, then they were dysfunctional. So they couldn't taste, they couldn't smell. And that's actually, come up to be kind of a sensitive marker of being, of kind of infection. And then basically goes into the brain, and then you can then have basically kind of neural invasion. And then, the sense of smell is, the loss of taste and smell is temporary. And, they kind of realize that within about like 3 to 4 weeks of your infection, you do return your sense of smell and taste.
That's a weird thing to lose. You can imagine you're sick and then you can't taste the bamboo shack. It's like the worst thing.
Well, it's true. The sense of smell and taste, it's pretty awful to like not, and some of the nurses that I work in the Cleveland Clinic, like they mentioned, that they lost their sense of smell and taste. And that was one of the first reasons that they went and got tested, was that they knew that something was going on and they went and got tested. And then the other thing would be for strokes. Remember, a stroke is caused by a blood clot that travels, from somewhere in your body, through your blood vessels and lodges into the blood vessel of the brain and cuts off, blood supply. And so the coronavirus, the SARS-CoV-2 virus, it basically affects essentially the lining of blood vessels. So one of the receptors it affects, it kind of binds onto, is in the blood vessels, which is why these patients are at higher risk for blood clots. So we call them blood clots in the lungs, blood clots in the legs, and those same blood clots can travel up and to the vessels of the brain and cause stroke as well.
That's fascinating. So the virus structure itself, it attaches to the blood vessels?
Yeah, so I'm definitely not an immunologist, but
right.
So they have basically spike proteins on the virus itself, and it attaches to one of the receptors on the blood vessels called the ACE2 receptors. It's on the lining of the blood vessels, and that receptor is found throughout your body, including your brain, lungs, gut, everywhere. And which is one of the reasons why it has such a multi-organ effect, is because this receptor is found everywhere in your body, and so it has that effect. And so it can directly affect the blood vessels and cause basically what we call dysfunction of the blood vessels. So it makes the blood vessels more, as blood is flowing through rather than flowing through nicely, it's getting stickier and clumping more, and then blood clots are forming. They did, at the one of the first pathology studies. So pathology is, when they do the autopsy studies,
right?
At the Brigham, Harvard and the Brigham, they did these autopsies, and of course, there was and there still is a large stigma related to taking care of patients with, lots of fear, lots of stigma. So patients were dying and no one was getting, autopsies were not being done. But even though it may have been valid and medically warranted, so the Brigham, they published one of the first series of, that's Harvard, they published one of the first series of pathology cases where they basically did the autopsies, and they saw basically lots of thrombus, which means like lots of little blood clots throughout the lungs and throughout other blood vessels of the body. And that was one of the first indicators that this is having effect on the blood vessels themselves.
Wow. Okay, because now I'm learning even more about COVID, and this little measly COVID-19 thingy. This is a gangster virus, right? So that's where,
I would say so.
yeah, it deserves my respect. It really is. It's like
it really has, it has, and there's been, the scientific process. I mean, I think one of the problems is kind of been because everything has been so new. The scientific process is evolving in front of our eyes, and those of us who are scientists, we're used to the scientific process. The scientific process is, you observe, you hypothesize, you test, you try, but to the layperson, it may look like chaos,
Yeah.
And so
and
slow, yeah. And the reaction to chaos oftentimes is rationalization, because you need to make your world make sense. Especially if you're not a scientist. And so I think there's been a lot of rationalization. Oh, it's just the flu. Oh, it's just this, it's just that. Because your brain, your own brain wants to basically find meaning in something that you can't comprehend,
That's an excellent point. Actually, that makes great sense. Are you a doctor? I'm just curious.
I think so. That's what I tell my father.
Yeah. I think he needs to know. He needs to know. If you're just tuning in, Dr. Madihah Hepburn, Chief Neurocritical Care Fellow at the Cleveland Clinic, and moving to a new hospital after she's done with her fellowship to practice in Akron, Ohio. So she's up there in the sticks where LeBron didn't stay, but we digress. So interestingly about the stroke then, it sounds as if it has nothing to do with age.
I mean, it does. I mean, I would say yes and no. So of course, and if you just think of it in like different, like, kind of like circles of hits, of what makes you more prone. So definitely, being older, already having, abnormal blood vessels, it makes a difference. But at the end of the day, yeah, it was really fascinating. We had like the first week that we were really on kind of like high alert and, waiting for the pandemic, our stroke volumes actually went down. And we couldn't figure out why our stroke volumes all of a sudden went down. And then within the next week, all of a sudden our stroke volumes just surged. And not only did they surge, they were like severe strokes, with lots of complications and things like that. And we realized that there was so much fear about seeking medical attention, because of course you didn't want to go to the hospital and be exposed, that persons were having their strokes at home and not seeking medical attention. And
really?
There was lots of actually studies published early in the year, early in the pandemic, was showing that that fear of seeking medical attention was one of the reasons why persons just did not present for medical care. And so they were having their severe strokes at home, and they're coming in the next week or week after with more complications. So yeah,
that's very interesting. So we started noticing, if you're just tuning in, you're listening to the Hit Back with Nahashi Black, Dr. Madihah Hepburn on the show with us. So at some point, like you mentioned, you were noticing that people were staying home, the stigma of it and whatnot. People are having strokes at home. That's scary in and of itself, that you would believe that you should stay away from seeking help.
Yeah.
But we started to learn about younger people, right? I remember when I was surprised, I was listening to the news in Miami, and Miami had its wave, or Florida had its wave, and there was this bodybuilder, 33-year-old guy, fine specimen. He dies of COVID-19. He has a stroke, but there's no history of heart disease.
Right.
And that goes back to what you're saying. But it seems that there doesn't need to be a comorbidity for that.
No, there doesn't need to be, and we go back to, like the pathophysiology of how the virus acts. It basically is attacking the blood vessels themselves. These persons are getting, clots everywhere. And the clots are, some of the clots are going to the brain and causing stroke, regardless of your age. I mean, I think we're just about to publish a series of cases, and now there's been a lot of series of cases of, patients with stroke, but, in our case series, we had patients who had both blood clots in the lungs, which are in the veins, and strokes, which are in the arteries, which are two different systems, which you usually don't clot in both systems simultaneously. And we've seen patients with their clotting simultaneously. We have patients who.
Sorry, and this is due to the inflammation and the attack of the virus within the blood vessels?
Yeah, that is correct.
Holy smokes.
Yeah, and so we get called, so we have, a lot of advanced therapies to treat stroke. So we're treating these patients, we're oftentimes, these patients, they're coming in with their stroke symptoms, and we basically presume that everyone has COVID, and you treat them, they're taking them for the intervention to retrieve the blood clot, which is kind of like a surgical procedure that my colleagues will do. And then, you're basically treating them. And because time is brain, so you can't sit down and wait for a test to come back. You need to treat them regardless of what their COVID status is or not. So you're just going to take all the precautions, use the PPE, the protective equipment that you need, and then the test will come back either positive or negative later. But we're treating them, we're basically treating them the same way that we treat other strokes. But just if they come in within the time window for acute intervention, where we can either do a procedure or give them a clot busting medication, we do. But we were also getting called for patients who had been admitted to the medical ICU with COVID, like on a ventilator, and then had a neurological change. And we scanned them and realized that they had, these patients had been in the hospital for a week or two, and they had their stroke right there in the hospital.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Comas. So you mentioned persons, ending up in a coma.
Sure.
And when are you seeing any challenges with when they are, because you mentioned earlier that when you try to take them out, or they're taking longer to come out, out of that coma. What are you seeing in terms of the damage to the brain? If not stroke related, but any other damage?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So we are, we do a lot of consults as well. So we have our own primary patients that, have neurological problems, plus or minus COVID. And then we also take consults in other ICUs, the cardiac ICU, the medical ICU. And, we take consults in the COVID unit as well up there. But yeah, we are seeing, so there's a combination of things. So one, you may have patients who have, severe illness, and they need to be on a ventilator. And when you're on a ventilator, sometimes they need heavy amounts of sedation, to keep them, in sync with the ventilator. And then, they're getting to a point where they're weaning off the sedative medications. You are anticipating that they should wake up on time with the clearance of the medication, and they're not. So then some of those patients, we do what we call imaging, like a CAT scan or MRI, and we find incidental strokes, which might be affecting their mentation and their ability to wake up, because it's affecting kind of your areas that deal with consciousness. And then there are some patients we scan their brains and we find nothing. But you put on, what we call EEG, which is kind of like a functional brain. I call it reading your brain waves. It's not really reading your brain waves, but it's kind of close. But you can see the activity, a person who is awake and alert, there's a particular pattern, on this particular test. And a patient who is comatose or very slow or very sedated, or their brain is globally dysfunctional, there's a different pattern, a very slow pattern. And we're seeing, we're monitoring those patients, even if they didn't have seizures and they don't have a stroke, they have this very slow pattern.
Oh, wow.
And then there's also patients who, because they had severe lung disease and their brains were deprived of oxygen, we're finding patients have what we call hypoxic, which is, lack of oxygen damage to the brain as well. So we're finding those as well. Especially those who had severe illness that they require them to be on like heart-lung support, what you call ECMO, which we have an ECMO unit at Cleveland Clinic. And some of those patients, they have kind of like marker or stigmata of, brain damage, from the lack of oxygen. So it's really, really, it's really variable. I guess I want to say, from that you can have structural changes, and to some patients, you just don't have any structural changes, but functionally their brain is dysfunctional.
Fascinating. Again, I wouldn't have thought that it would, have this sort of effect.
Yeah.
other than hearing that there was this gentleman, he's a CNN reporter, older gentleman, he had COVID. Caught
Was
COVID.
that Chris Como?
No, not Cuomo. It was the older one with CNN, British accent guy.
Oh,
right?
Probably if I see his face.
Yeah, if you saw his face. And he was doing a report afterward and mentioned how he's so much more clumsy, right? So he's clumsier. And he can't, he sees things ahead of him. He would reach for it, but somehow he would miss it.
Right.
He's falling down off of the pavement. And that was the first time I thought, and again, like I'm mentioning, I didn't realize the loss of smell, the loss of taste, those things are brain related. Just call me silly and uneducated, right?
No, not at all.
But when he said it, that's when it clicked to me. Hold on, is your brain getting affected? Have you gotten any information or data on that? Like, how is one losing their balance?
Right. So, the best way we can think of it pathophysiologically is that there's a state of almost like global dysfunction, or the best way I can put it is like there's a state of the best way you can put it is brain stunning. That there is a measure of brain stunning that's happening, that the whole brain is dysfunctional. But added to that, persons who have been ill for a long period of time, maybe in the hospital on a ventilator, overall their muscles are weaker. They're just generally weaker. So everything is, your brain itself, which should be the head, or should be the center to coordinate everything, is already not clicking or not firing on all cylinders. And add to that, your body was already weakened. So the combination of that can be one reason why you have imbalance or clumsiness. I think there was one of our attendings who was on CNN a couple of weeks ago. I'm trying to remember. Yeah, a couple of weeks ago. But they also interviewed a nurse. No, sorry, not a nurse, but an employee at the Cleveland Clinic, who basically talked about her neurological journey with COVID-19. Which included starting that she realized that something was happening she was having essentially hallucinations. She wasn't even coughing or sneezing or, she was having hallucinations first. And then she had hallucinations throughout the entire, hospital stay. And then there was a coma. And then even coming out of it, there was, a difficulty, a slowness of cognition. And so, there's actually quite a few kind of what we call global consortium studies, where they're basically collecting patients with, COVID and neurological manifestations, whether it's stroke, seizure, coma, delirium, because the aim would be to basically follow those patients forward in time and perhaps do, cognitive studies later on, neuropsychological studies later on, so that we can get more information of how this is, the trajectory of this.
Have you guys seen any, you'd mentioned earlier that these viruses, this COVID virus, the SARS virus, it is a SARS virus, is it?
So it's SARS, which is severe acute respiratory syndrome, coronavirus 2.
Got it. Fancy.
So SARS-CoV-2.
But you said that, before that this type of virus, though this one is novel, right? This type of virus has affected, and I lost my train of thought. I was so close. How was I so close and I lost it?
You were saying it has affected the brain before?
Yeah, it has affected the brain before. So has any virus been this deadly or this aggressive to the brain before? Thank you for bringing me back.
Oh, no problem. So, there's quite a few viruses that, have an effect on the brain. So, families of viruses, for example, like the herpes virus, that can cause, a type of brain inflammation, which actually can kill persons, but obviously it's not as communicable as COVID-19. The influenza virus itself as well, there have been, cases reported of, stroke related to influenza virus and other neurological manifestations. But I would say, the novel coronavirus, 19, is really been it's been unusual in that in the way that it's been able to, spread, it's been able to spread so quickly and so easily between people, so to speak. And so that it's kind of like circled the globe. And it seems to have more of a multi-system, effect. And I think that could be one of the reasons is because of its effect on the vasculature, on the blood vessels, which supply every aspect of your body.
Dr. Madihah Hepburn here. Doc, let me ask you my final question.
Sure.
For my texter. The final question is the mask issue, right? A lot of this texter is concerned that how does wearing a mask, if you're not well, how does that affect your brain? Like, how does that affect you? Because they're saying that for them that the mask can be an issue for them.
Well, your texter may not like my answer. So I work in an intensive care unit. So when I go so pretty much every day, at the Cleveland Clinic, everyone wears a mask every single day. Like as soon as you walk in the door, there's mask right there. You put on a mask. Well, you usually switch your mask because, I'm wearing a mask for my car. And then I put on a Cleveland Clinic mask and then I walk, surgical mask, and then I go to my unit. But if I have a patient who has potential coronavirus, I have to do, procedures where I have to wear an N95 mask, sometimes for, quite a while. And, plus I wear the gown and, everything, face shield. And I'll be honest, it doesn't affect your oxygen levels at all. So there's actually been like a ton of studies, essentially kind of like observational studies where people have basically worn an N95 mask or worn a surgical mask, worn multiple masks. Just look on YouTube, like lots of doctors have basically debunked it because this is how we work every single day. And even pre-coronavirus, think of it, the surgeon who was taking care of you, he was wearing a mask, for hours at a time and operating on you.
Yeah.
He or she was operating on you, and they weren't passing out from lack of oxygen. So I would say, now there are some persons who, have like severe respiratory illness, and those patients, may, find that this might be bothersome, but that type of severe respiratory illness is pretty rare and probably not in the general population. So I would say, no, the mask itself is not going to cause you to lose oxygen. It is not comfortable, I agree. And it is definitely something to get used to it. But, you can get it in lots of different ways. Yeah. And you can get it with cats. You can get it with whatever you like.
Doc, I appreciate you. Dr. Madihah Hepburn here with us on the Hit Back. I appreciate you so much. And I will be sharing this on my Facebook page. So you can, of course, with your parents and folks, Doc, you can have them watch it over and over and be proud. You're listening to the Hit Back with Nahaja Black here on Guardian 96.9 FM. The one and only Dr. Madihah Hepburn, y'all. We will see you all tomorrow. You're listening to the Hit Back with Nahaja Black. Thanks, Doc.
Hey, thanks, Nahaja. See you later.
Take care.
Bye.
All right, everybody. See you all tomorrow. We're out.